If you are struggling in your journey of trying to find the medication that works, we all go through it and we continue to go through it. It's okay that you're struggling through that. You will find something that works. And my advice is be 100% transparent with your medical provider on what you are feeling, even down to the fact that, hey, I'm feeling extremely depressed lately. I don't know why. I'm working through this. I'm working through that. I'm having trouble, whatever it is. Be transparent. When you take a medication doesn't work, I told my psychiatrist my anxiety was through the roof. I don't know if I can do this. We had an emergency meeting and we quickly adjusted my medication.
Welcome to Successful with ADHD. I'm Brooke Schnittman. Let's get started.
Welcome back to Successful with ADHD, where we shine the light on the strengths of individuals with ADHD and their journeys to reach success. Today, we have a special guest to me and to you soon enough, as soon as you hear. His name is Chris Nowicki. And Chris has been in aerospace defense industry for over 16 years. How cool is that, right? Overcoming his own ADHD challenges throughout the years, and is currently pursuing a new career as a software engineer. And in his free time, loves to smoke weed. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, thank you, Brooke. Thank you for having me. This is an honor to be on your podcast.
Thank you, my friends. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Mm-hmm.
So tell the viewers what your journey was like. Like, what officially got you to get an ADHD diagnosis?
Yeah. It really comes down to when I was in 6th grade. So my parents started to notice something a little bit different with me, especially in how I was learning. My grades were dropping. The standard way of what was happening in the classroom, how I was being taught, was not working. And my parents said, let's get him tested. Now, this is back in the early 90s. So when this was kind of a newer diagnosis, I think around the late 80s, early 90s. So I went through testing for a day, got my diagnosis, and was put on in the early days, kind of Ritalin. And I think that's the history, from when I got first diagnosed in 6th grade. From there on out, it was just a struggle all the way through high school to try and figure out, how is my brain working? I didn't even understand how my brain was working. I was still coming into my own. My GPA in high school was, 2.3. I mean, it was very, very low. When you looked at my scores, you would go, well, I'm very bright in math. I'm very bright in chemistry, anything that involved logic and, very structured, which I know a lot of you out there can understand from who are learning about your diagnosis. And it was just horrible. I would go in the special room for tests. I would be able to take my own time. I got my own time on the SATs. But it wasn't until college. So, throughout high school, it was just, I think in my mind, surviving, figuring out what worked to get through high school, because I was taking courses that did not engage what I loved and what I was passionate about.
Sure.
And so that was kind of the early on stages of, I needed to get diagnosed. My parents were the ones that initiated it, went on medication all the way up through college, and then stopped after college, and then moved on from there.
Why did you stop after college?
Yeah, so it was one of those, as I was going on in my journey, in college, I actually got 3.7 GPA in college without any changes, right? So I was taking medication. But in college, I was taking courses that I loved. So all involving, and my background is a lot of computer science.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. I was passionate about it. And what I found was, when I was passionate about a specific topic, I excelled. I mean, I was in it. I was hyper focused. I just wanted to do it all the time. I forget about eating, forget about sleeping, forget about all the healthy things that we do to take care of each other. It was hyper focus central. And so after that, I started to realize, I'm doing okay, but I'm still not myself. And I didn't feel like myself on medication at the time. It had moved over the years from, Ritalin to Wellbutrin to Adderall. So I was on a stimulant for a while. And I just didn't like the way that it made me feel. And so what I decided to do was, I said, I'm going to do my own test, and I'm just going to stop taking it. And so I stopped taking the medication my junior year of college. and my grades stayed the same. I felt more like myself. I had an appetite again, and I felt, my goofy old self rather than, I don't want to say a robot, but, you just, I kind of felt like a drone when I was on the
Yeah.
medication a little bit. And it's
Yeah.
helpful. I'm not saying it's bad, for people. Just for me in
No.
particular.
But you were able to find something that you're passionate about and do well without the medication.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I wanted to go into computers, because it was something that I loved and something that I enjoyed. I got exposed to that at a really early age. My dad and I built computers together. And so when I was in college, focusing on that, I mean, it was very clear to me. Now, it's kind of funny, though, the way that it worked out. And when I went to college, the college that I went to was Champlain College in Burlington, Vermont. And this college was pretty cool. It was a business school, but it had you focus on your core topics first. So meaning, what are the core
Oh, I love
subjects to
that.
get your degree?
Which makes so much sense, right?
Yeah,
Because if you don't like it, then before year 4.
exactly. You're not wasting your time on Western Civ. You're not wasting your time
Yes.
on any of and those all have their benefits. You learn how to do research, communicate, write well, etc.
Yeah.
But for me, going into college and being able to do all my core courses first, now within that, I had a few mixed items. I had a writing class, I had a literature class, a few things here and there, but they're very, very far and few between, maybe 1 or 2 classes a semester, but they weren't really called your gen ed courses. So after I got my associate's degree in 2001, I decided to take a break from school. I was tired, I was exhausted, and I just wanted to take a break. So I took a break for 2 years, and then I went back to school in 2003. So when I go back to school in 2003, I went to Greenville College in Southern Illinois, now Greenville University. And they said, well, you already have your associate's degree, so your gen eds are waived. And
Twist my arm.
it was awesome. So very lucky.
Sorry, I can't go here.
I can't go, sorry, no, I'm not going to go here. But it was really cool from, I would say I'm fairly lucky, that I got to skip a lot of those courses. Now, again, even throughout my 2 years at Greenville College, I still had to take some of the core classes to graduate, but I was taking things like trigonometry. I was taking things like
That you love.
that all things that I love. There's maybe 1 or 2 things in there that were, I don't want to take them. But overall, though, I wasn't stuck with the Western Civs. I keep on saying that. That's the one general ed that I know of. But, and
Right. We are very clear
Mhm.
that social studies is not your thing. It's not
No.
my thing.
No.
Yeah.
Reading, writing, comprehension. I mean, that's my disability. Technically, I was diagnosed with reading, writing, comprehension disability. So anything that involved research, writing. I remember I was in a literature class, and they're doing short stories, and the midterm was on 25 short stories that we had read, and my brain about died because every story I would forget. Shoot, I forget what I talked to my wife about yesterday, let alone what I read.
Right. I don't care if it's short or not.
Exactly. So that's why I went off medication. I was just like, after being able to be lucky and focus on the things that I loved, I noticed that I really didn't need the help of medication to focus, because I was naturally focusing because I was doing what I loved.
Wonderful. Okay. So fast forward.
Mhm.
You're in the defense industry for 16 years, which is very atypical for individuals with ADHD to stay in the same career for 16 years. So, what do you contribute some of that success to today, besides loving what you do?
I would attribute that to coming up with a structure that worked for me. And it's been a journey in trying to figure out what works for me, because in 16 years at one company, your job changes, and when I started off with the company, I had a very simple job in the industry, which was to write technical manuals on how to troubleshoot, remove, and replace computer enterprise systems.
That sounds miserable.
It sounds miserable, but to me, I loved it because I took engineering notes. I went down and I got to have my hands on the equipment. I would test them and rewrite them to something that makes sense to a non-engineer. And it's very linear. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. I know that this week I need to get these procedures written. Do I have them? Okay, I go downstairs and write them. Done. very linear task. Once all the
Yes.
manual is done, I spend a year or so doing that. Then I write training material and I get to teach people what I love. Here's how you do it. And then I would go out and teach soldiers how to maintain, repair, whatever it is that I was teaching them to do. So it's very linear. I think that's the key here. That's probably going to be the key theme. And the way my brain works from a neurodivergent standpoint is I'm a linear thinker, right? And it changed over the years. That's just what I did from 2007 till about 2000, I would say 14. That was my job. I would write training material, technical documentation, go out and train people. And I loved it. I'm an extrovert. I love talking with people and I love teaching new skills. That's something I didn't know that I could do. And it was great. But in 2014, there was an interesting turn in my career that happened. And a lot of people face this turn in their career where they're given the choice to, do you stay as an individual contributor or do you move into management? What do you do? I wasn't pursuing management. Management kind of fell upon me as it was more of, I saw something happening. It wasn't going to work. And so I stepped in as the lead. And so since 2014, all the way up till today, my career has shifted from being an independent contributor to managing people, programs, projects, and budgets. And that brought in a whole new layer of nonlinear tasks that caused my brain to malfunction. And it was a slow process because it wasn't all at once. So 2014, I would say to 2018, I was managing programs, but not people. I was managing, the execution of tasks, budgets. So it was just adding a little bit more nonlinear items to the plate. But in 2018, I took on a role where I was a senior manager and I had direct reports. So I was now responsible not only for programs and budgets, but I was responsible for my employees, their day-to-day tasks. Are they supporting their roles well, their programs well? And when that happened, my brain broke. It just quickly, being able to work with, at one point, I think I had up to 32 employees, being able to manage them, bring in new programs, work on proposals, fly around the country, meeting with different program managers, representing the programs, whatnot. It was hard for me to keep task of the day-to-day activities. Like I just couldn't keep track of any of it.
Yeah.
And so right before the pandemic, it was right around March 2020, I just got done with a year of traveling nonstop. And I decided to see a therapist. I think I need to get some ADHD medication. And that started my journey back into pursuing some sort of medication to help my brain, because as I was getting older, my brain was changing, chemicals were changing, dopamine was not firing the way that it used to. And the tasks that I was doing weren't necessarily feeding my passion. I enjoy working with people. I enjoy my team. I enjoy managing them and the work that they do. But there's a part of me that misses creativity and touching things and doing the linear writing and doing the independent contributor type tasks.
Okay, so you saw a therapist, right? And you got a medication for ADHD again, correct?
Well, it was interesting. So at the time, I was actually referred through my therapist to a psychologist. So I went to a psychologist because that's where, we get our medication. I mean, it was just right after the pandemic started. So everything's on lockdown. And so I meet with this psychiatrist and he tells me, well, you don't have ADHD. And I go, what? And it was very confusing for me, but I said, okay, I'll hear you out. He goes, look, you have a lot of childhood trauma, which is true. I had a lot of childhood trauma. And he goes, you really have mild OCD and generalized anxiety. And I said, well, I kind of know that, but all right, you're the psychiatrist. So I got put on clonazepam, which is a severe drug for anxiety.
That's what he said that you should be on?
Clonazepam, and then I went on, I believe it was Prozac, so for the depression. And so his meeting with him, he would have me visualize my child and my childhood self in a corner and start writing about it. And it just wasn't working. it wasn't working at all. So I did that all the way through right around February, March of 2021. And that's when I came across your info, and you and I started talking, and I was telling you what I was on, and we talked about some things to talk about. And I switched psychologist. I basically said, I'm not going to go to this person anymore. I switched psychologist, and my new psychologist, he sat down with me, and he walked through every single thing. He goes, okay, let's just go through what I would go through from a checklist, from an AD,
Absolutely. It's
right?
complex.
It's not a simple black and white thing.
Correct.
Not always based on trauma, and everybody's mind is different. My mind is going to work differently than most of your viewers' minds, because our minds are so uniquely individual and complex to ourselves.
And from childhood, right?
It's all from childhood, and it stems. There's so many factors. How were you raised? What did you eat as a child? It's crazy.
What did you see? What exactly? And I also have generalized anxiety, and I find, and Dr. Amen talks about this, that if you have anxiety, that it could help you be more like focused on the things and more obsessive with what you're doing. So in that sense, like you might have OCD or you might have obsessive thoughts, but your ADHD might be looking linear rather than all over the place, where a lot of people think that their brain is, that it's not linear. But that can also be because of the complexity of it, because of the anxiety and OCD and the trauma.
1000%. It's all different. And my new psychiatrist, he goes, you know what? He goes, Chris, yes, you do have generalized anxiety. You do not need to be on clonazepam. That's for people who are crippled. They
having panic attacks, right?
Attacks. They can't walk out the door. And my OCD wasn't the type that was destructive to my way of life. It wasn't tapping the doorknob 3 times. My OCD actually comes out in organization and cleaning, because that's what makes my brain think that everything is okay and safe. So it's funny, my wife will know that something's going on when I just start randomly cleaning the kitchen. And I looked at her, I said, honey, how many husbands do you know out there love to clean the kitchen, and it gives their mind peace? Yeah, just let me do it. And I do it. But that's where my OCD would come out. So after talking with my psychiatrist, he goes, you know what? Let's put you back on Wellbutrin, because it's going to do 2 things. It's going to help you with your dopamine. It helps out. It's naturally a depression medication, and it's going to help out with your ADD. And I did that for all the way up through a couple months ago. I was on Wellbutrin, and it helped significantly with just my generalized anxiety. My mood was lifted. I was able to focus a little bit more, which allowed me to think through what do I need to put in place in my life to allow myself to be productive at work, focus, get my tasks done without procrastinating, which, let's face it, still procrastinate. I mean, I was going through the questions for this podcast this morning, and then that changed to now I'm not on ADD medication. My depression got really bad. And so I met with my doctor, and I talked through all the things that was happening, and we decided to make that the priority, to where I'm now on fluoxetine, so Prozac basically. It's not an ADHD medication, but what it's doing is helping out so much with my depression symptoms that I was having. My mood is lifted, and now I'm doing other things to help my dopamine, whereas medication would normally kick in.
Yeah, it's so interesting because everyone, like you said, it's so complex. Someone was saying that there's like 6,000 different types of ADHD, even though there's 3 types, it presents so differently. So one medication like Wellbutrin might work for a while, and then it might not work anymore because you're in a different life situation. And then you might need to try something else. Maybe you need a stimulant, maybe you need a non-stimulant, maybe you need an antidepressant. So it's forever changing, and you kind of just have to ride that wave with it too.
Yeah, it's a trial by error. I mean, when I told them that I didn't think the Wellbutrin was working anymore, we actually put me on a stimulant again. We got put on methylphenidate. I forgot what.
Methylphenidate?
Yeah, that one. Okay.
Which is like Concerta.
It's basically the generic Concerta. Yeah.
Yes.
This is why you're the professional in this field. And what I found was, the moment that I took that, because it's an immediate drug, My anxiety was through the roof. It was not
So stimulants are not good for you.
stimulants. I can't. I said, all right. So I have a whole bottle, bottle of that stuff, and I'm not touching it. Even my wife noticed I was walking around the house like a crazy. I was just anxious about everything. I don't even know why, And so we decided, okay, that isn't the best route. And so I think to anyone on the call Zoom in,
Okay.
anyone who's watching or listening, it's if you are struggling in your journey of trying to find the medication that works, we all go through it and we continue to go through it. It's okay that you're struggling through that. You will find something that works. And my advice is be 100% transparent with your medical provider on what you are feeling, even down to the fact that, hey, I'm feeling extremely depressed lately. I don't know why. I'm working through this. I'm working through that. I'm having trouble. Whatever it is, be transparent. When you take a medication doesn't work, I told my psychiatrist, my anxiety was through the roof. I don't know if I can do this. We had an emergency meeting and we quickly adjusted my medication.
So, but you're very in tune with your feelings. You married someone who is in the field.
I married a therapist. Yes.
You married a therapist and you've been to therapists, but not everyone with ADHD really understands their emotions all the time. Just people in general, And I know you have to like name it to tame it, but how would you recommend that someone be more in tune with their emotions or whatever they're feeling?
There's a couple resources you can use, and I don't necessarily have links to them, but I'm sure you can find them out. You can use a feelings wheel. If you go on Google, you can look for feelings wheel and charts, and really what it has is it has a column that says sad, but then it branches out to all the different kinds of sad, and you kind of learn that there's so many different emotions in the ranges of being sad, being angry, and you see one word, you go, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that existed, but yes, I resonate with that. That's what I am. And if you're someone who has a hard time really expressing, not really understanding your emotions, go to therapy. I mean, go to therapy. If your insurance doesn't cover it, find a way to make it work. Because even before I met my wife, who's the therapist, I've been doing therapy for most of my life for multiple reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And therapy can really help you learn to recognize over time what you are feeling. So you can talk about with your therapist something that you're going through, and they may say, how do you feel? And you go, well, I don't know. And then you might describe a few things, and then they can help generalize that for you and start to help you identify and associate words with feelings. So that's one thing you can do. But if you're not in a place where you're able to meet with a therapist right now and you're still struggling through that, go and get a feelings chart, kind of even just talk it out with your psychiatrist saying, I don't understand what I'm feeling, but this is what's going on in my mind. Sometimes your feeling maybe not be sad. Sometimes it could be, I feel like my brain is out of control and going a million miles a minute and I can't slow it down. And I feel like I'm going, that's a way to express it. Express it whatever way you want to. It may not make sense, but the professionals will help you make sense of what doesn't make sense to you.
Totally. So you have tried many different things. Mm-hmm. Are you open to sharing? So obviously we worked together. We did some ADHD coaching for a while. Mm-hmm. You did the one-on-one and then the group, and you've done therapy, but you've also tried some other different types of therapy. Can you explain what you've done?
Yes. So I did a therapy for a while that's called neurofeedback. So neurofeedback is kind of interesting. It's where they put a little brain map cap on your head. It does not hurt. They're not going to shock you or anything like that. But what they do is they map the different brain waves, your theta, your beta. It was really interesting. So they map it out and then they come back with a report to you based on your brain waves. And it's kind of cool. The number one thing on my list was ADD. And then number 2 was insomnia. I was having major issues sleeping. So insomnia was a part of that. OCD was 30% of that. Also, how we react in our fight or flight responses.
Wow.
So yeah, it's really interesting. So how are, as ADHDers or any neurodivergent person, if you are struggling with anxiety or something, in a fight or flight response, your brain goes crazy, right? It overthinks. It causes our overthinking part to trigger. I mean, can you only imagine, when I remember when I was dating, and I look back now, the more I understand about my brain, and when I didn't get that text back from a girl that I was interested in, the overthinking that would happen in that moment, because I was like, oh no, I did something wrong. I said something wrong. What's going on?
That led you to that F response, which is
Right.
for you maybe shut down or
100,
re-
1000%.
yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One,
I'm a
and
freezer also.
I freeze, and we call it, I completely disconnect, and it's become more apparent in marriage, because even in marriage, I've only been married for a year and a half now. Yeah, about a year and a half now. My wife will notice that I pull away, and
Yeah.
not, I just disconnect, and it's not because I don't want to talk to her. It's because I don't know. It's how I've coped for so long, to just sit on the
Yes.
couch. She calls it the couch sloth. I sloth on the couch. I turn on usually for me, it's Big Bang Theory. That's my show that I know and love, and I just watch it because it brings me comfort, and I don't have to think about anything,
You
and I
feel safe.
disconnect. Right. So with neurofeedback, what happens after that is they go, okay, we have a plan of attack. And so they attack different brainwaves. So for a while, they attacked my insomnia. And in the insomnia brainwaves, and now I'm not an expert in this, so I'm going to explain it the best that I know how. They try to balance out the waves to a normal level, okay, or reconnect them where they're not firing. And the way that they do that, you sit in a room, you have the cap on your head, and they put on Netflix. So a show that I wanted to watch, I started rewatching Blacklist because I thought it was a phenomenal show, and I forgot about it, wanted to watch it again. And then what they do is they put a screen over the Netflix screen, and it's a digital screen, not a physical one, but it's kind of like a little window, and it goes black, so you can't see it. And then when the brain waves go into the normal, it goes clear, and you don't have to do anything. I'm not sitting there with my brain going, I want to see the movie. Your brain just naturally wants that feedback, because that dopamine hits when you're watching something you like. The dopamine hits. It may not be dopamine, it may be something else, but something happens in your brain that says, this is a positive feedback. I want to be watching this. And so it just starts to naturally on its own. So you just sit there and watch TV, and your brain starts to adjust to what they're doing.
Wow.
And when they started targeting my insomnia, within about, you start to notice different effects. So regardless of which brainwaves they're focusing on, it's about a 20 session treatment. By about session 6, you start to notice some things. So I was sleeping a little bit better. And then they started to focus on the overthinking area, the fight or flight responses. And soon enough, things that would normally cause me to either panic, or even if, let's say, my wife and I were in a little bit of an argument, things that would cause me to not understand what's going on, and my brain starts to overthink, and that all calmed down, and I would start to have normal calming responses, and we would both go, oh, something is different. And I don't believe the treatment is, for the most part, covered by insurances. I paid about $2,000 for about 20 sessions, but we found it super, super, super helpful, and it really decreased I'm sleeping better. Oddly enough, I don't snore as much, which my wife is very
maybe
happy
I need to send my husband there.
right?
I didn't sleep last night. Yeah. Maybe we both need to go.
And some nights I do still snore. I mean, she's now wearing earplugs, so God bless her. God bless her soul. So that's one thing. All right, you can go look it up again. It's called neurofeedback. There's a lot of studies on it out there, and I'm in the mindset of, I'm just going to try something and see if it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't. But if it does, great, right?
Great.
The second thing is more of I would say a therapy focus, and it's called EMDR, and
movement, dialectical something.
Response, something like that.
Yeah.
We all have trauma from our past. Well, I hope not everyone, but I know we all have some sort of trauma from our past. The way that we respond to situations in our life are from a certain place in our life. All right. Something that we don't ever remember. They're all imprinted in our brains, in our memories, in our subconscious. So with EMDR, what they do is, with someone who specializes in EMDR, you take a look at this light, and you just follow it back and forth with your eyes at different movements. So you're doing an eye movement. And while you're doing that, you're processing a thought, a feeling, a memory, whatever it might be. And you work with the therapist to kind of remap a memory. Maybe a good example, let's say you're an introvert and you're afraid of speaking out, and you're afraid of standing up for yourself, and in situations where, there might have been a childhood trauma that caused that for you, well, you can do EMDR against that, and you can remap that to where my therapist would say, all right, what would you want to do in this moment? And I want to turn into the Hulk and smash out, and you do that in your brain in the moment, and you do what you think you wanted to do the whole time, whether it's being able to speak out, speak up for yourself, and you relive that in your brain while you're watching the eye movement. And what happens is that physical response, whether it's anxiety, whether it's shutting down, whether it could be anything, but it's a physical response.
Mm-hmm.
That response slowly diminishes, and because that memory is remapped to a new memory that you've created, a new visual of a traumatic event. So you're visualizing that traumatic event, and then you're doing what you've always wanted to do in that event. You're standing up for yourself. You're saying something to someone, whether it's a parent, a sibling, a friend, or whatever situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many of us will go back. I mean, I do this all the time. I wish I said this. Why didn't I think of this? Right? And here you are, do it.
Well, and exactly, here you are, do it. But here's the crazy thing that I found myself when I first started EMDR, I was processing a specific memory of the memory, the feeling was, I'm not going to amount to anything.
Yeah.
And it brought me back to a specific childhood memory of when I was a sophomore in high school. I mean, and I'm talking very specific. I'm 42 years old. I have not thought about this since, the early 90s. It was
90s. In your subconscious mind.
Right. It was, and it just came back, and it was playing for me like a movie in my mind. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is where this feeling is coming from. This is why I feel like I'm going to amount to nothing, because this specific thing happened to me. And so then I was able to reprocess that, rewire that. And it was really powerful. Yeah.
So you would recommend to anyone listening to try, all of these things, like all of them have had a positive impact on you?
All of them have had a positive impact. What I would recommend is I wouldn't jump straight into EMDR right away. What I would do is I would seek out a therapist who maybe has an EMDR specialist, talk with them about what you're going through, and see if they recommend something that would be helpful to you. Most likely they probably will. If a therapist says, hey, you should probably take EMDR, or you're unsure about neurofeedback, I've had positive experiences to both and would highly recommend it if it's an opportunity that you have.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So Chris, what would be your number one success tip for ADHDers listening right now?
Yeah. Okay. Keep it simple. All right. Keep it simple. I'm a computer guy, so I love to-do apps. I think in my period of time of talking to you, how many to-do applications did I go through?
Oh,
I'm trying Tick. I'm trying Todoist. I am trying all these things. And for real, if you spend time managing your to-do apps and not doing the to-dos on the to-do apps, get rid of it. Just get rid of it. Go back to a simple pen and paper, cross it off. I've actually found that being a lot better. At nighttime, what I do at the end of the day at work now, I'm putting what are the 3 main things I need to get done tomorrow. They may change. You may not tackle them, but I'm at least thinking about it. In the morning, I'm reviewing those before I do them. I go and do them. I have a whole other thing for notes, and I go back and check it. To-do apps are good. They're okay. I have a simple one that I use on my Mac called Things, or I just use the simple notes app that comes along with it. But I'm just looking for something that's linear. I just give me what to do today, and I will go and do it.
Yeah. Okay. So you know that right now your brain just wants it simple. You don't want to manage another thing. You just want simplification. Super.
Because then you start managing that, you're gonna become hyper focused on that. And how can I make this better? We become stuck in the process of focusing on how can I make my efficiencies more efficient rather than being efficient.
I love that. That's an amazing place to stop. So for those of the people listening who may want to get in touch with you, tell them what you're up to, because I think that's so cool.
Yeah. So last year I went back to school for full stack software web development. You can find my website, chrisnowicki, ChrisNowicki.io. And that's where I'm just trying to pursue a new career right now, freelancing. I missed the independent contributor parts that we talked about, right? So I'm pursuing a career in software development. Yeah, and after going back to school, that's a whole nother topic, but I did school, passed for a year, and then now I'm just continuing to do what I do.
And you're starting a podcast.
Yes. So I actually am planning on starting a podcast after a few other things are lined up. But for ADHDers, specifically those that are developers. So how do we work through ADHD as software developers? What tools do we have as software developers to help us, especially now that AI is huge in the developer space and in all spaces?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of you listening who are going to want that. And what are you going to call it so people know to come to you?
Well, we're still figuring out a name, but I think right now I've landed on Neurodivergent Coders.
Okay. Well, when you get that out, we can update a link in the description.
Yeah. And I can update you more on that later.
Wonderful. Chris, it's amazing speaking to you as usual. Thank you for coming on to
It's an
Successful
honor
with
being a
ADHD.
guest. I'm so proud of you and just everything. This is so cool. This is great.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Successful with ADHD. I hope it helped you on your journey. And if you need any additional support for you or a loved one with ADHD, feel free to reach out to us at coachingwithbrooke.com and all social media platforms at Coaching with Brooke. And remember, it's Brooke with an E. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.